Welcome to Dire Straits. I'm Tracy Clark Flory.
I'm Amanda Monti.
Today, we're talking about couples therapy. From its troubling start nearly a century ago as basically a racist and sexist eugenics project to its currently growing popularity among young, unmarried couples in this era of therapy speak. We'll look at how couples therapy shows up on reality TV and in celebrity gossip, and we'll unpack what that tells us about love, marriage, sex, and heterosexuality today. We'll also ask tough questions about how couples therapy challenges sexism and inequality in straight relationships, but also how it enables and excuses it. Basically, we're putting couples therapy on the couch. We're also putting ourselves on the couch because we're going to share our own experiences with couples therapy toward the end of the episode. But the juicy stuff is going to be behind a paywall. To get access to the full episode and other bonus content, make sure to upgrade your subscription at direstraitspod.com. We can't do this without your support. Before we really get into it, I thought we'd talk about couples therapy as it shows up in pop culture right now. Amanda, do you watch couples therapy on Showtime?
I do, or I should say I did. I used to watch it all the time, especially when I was in couples therapy, and now I'm taking a break. I can't really watch it right now.
Yeah,
I,
that
I, I
makes
am
sense.
going through a divorce, so
Yeah, now would be the time to take a break. That makes sense. Yes, I have watched religiously every single season. I love it so much and find it fascinating. And obviously, Dr. Orna is so brilliant and so smart. If only we all had access to such an amazing therapist.
oh my God, that's what I think every time I watch it is like, well, yeah, like if I had her, then everything would be great in my
Yes.
life. It's a good show. It's a really good show. I just feel like this is my chance to not be in couples therapy.
Right.
So why would
We
I
now,
subject myself
yeah.
to it?
Right. We did that. Now you get a break. Yeah.
As we will discuss.
Yes, yes, indeed. So, couples therapy also showed up recently in Hulu's Dying for Sex, starring Michelle Williams. At the very start of the series, we see her in character in couples therapy, and she's fantasizing about a man from her 20s going down on her. Meanwhile, her husband, a real doofus of a husband, is complaining about the fact that she wants to have sex with him.
Right. She wants too much sex, according to him.
Yeah.
I kind of forget though, what is the couples therapist? How do they respond?
I actually don't remember the couple's therapist feeling very present in the scene. I mean, I think maybe in that sense, it was a representation of how couples therapy can not be so great, where like the husband's given a whole lot of space to complain and pathologize. He pathologizes her desire, suggesting that it's just the cancer drugs that she's on that are making her horny. And it's in the middle of this couples therapy scene that she gets a call from her doctor and learns that her cancer has returned and that she's going to die, which prompts her to leave her marriage and embark on a very meaningful midlife sexual reawakening. So in this case, couples therapy kind of comes off as a trap. It's a place where she is stuck trying to make things work with her self-involved husband. And what a statement that the news of her terminal diagnosis busts into that scene as a ticket towards relative freedom because it frees her from trying to make this marriage work. I also wanted to see how couples therapy is showing up in celebrity and tabloid news right now. And I found a bunch of headlines about celebrities who are rumored to be in couples therapy. Um, and I feel like couples therapy has kind of become this new divining rod for celebrities' love lives. Do you want to read some of these headlines that I found along with some of the key quotes from the articles?
Yes. And also just like how could you be a celebrity couple and not be in therapy? Like
Yeah.
what a hard thing to
Right.
navigate, but
Well, right. And like maybe the headlines should be like so and so's not in couples therapy and we're
right.
deeply concerned for them.
Right. Well, that's what's interesting, right? Is that this idea that they're in therapy is supposed to be like
Mm,
foreboding, like, there's
yes.
something wrong, right? Okay,
Yes.
so I see Barack and Michelle Obama returning to couples therapy. Oh, they're returning. So like they got out and now they're back, which is I guess supposed to be bad news.
Yeah.
Um and we have some quotes here. Barack and Michelle Obama are seemingly doing everything in their power to keep their marriage from completely falling apart as they have now found themselves at couples therapy again.
Again.
Okay,
The
interesting.
failure.
Right. Well, and also that they're like working really hard to keep it together. I mean,
Hmm.
there's this quote here too. They love each other deeply, but marriage is work, the
Marriage
insider
is
said.
work.
They're committed to doing that work even
Mm.
now. I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but there's a lot of sort of moralism around this notion
Hmm.
of work underneath
Yeah.
these statements.
Right. Like it sounds virtuous. Like they're committed. Like they're good people, you know? They're committed to doing that work, even now.
Right. Okay. And then I see Kanye West and Bianca Censori saved their marriage with couples therapy on their secret trip to Spain. Well, that's a nice trip. That sounds
Yeah,
really great.
seriously. You could save a lot of marriages that way, probably.
Exactly. I'd rather do that than go to couples therapy. Kanye West and Bianca Censori have reportedly turned a corner in their tumultuous marriage. Can't imagine why it's tumultuous to be married to Kanye West. Thanks to a transformative couples therapy retreat. Oh my gosh. While the details of their therapy sessions remain private, the couple's willingness to invest in their relationship,
Hmm.
interesting financial language there,
Mm,
and seek professional guidance underscores their dedication to making the marriage work
mm,
as they continue to navigate the challenges of public life and personal growth. Interesting. West and Sensori's journey serves as a reminder of the importance of communication, understanding, and committed relationships. Is this serious? Like we're talking about Kanye
Kanye
West,
West.
and isn't she the woman that he supposedly convinced to wear like a
Yeah.
skin-colored bodysuit?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But, personal growth and investing in their relationship and making the marriage work. Like, it's amazing how much like that kind of stock language is used to apply to like clearly any marriage, any situation, because
Right.
it's just so absurd, especially in this particular situation of
Yeah.
a relationship that seems very clearly troubled. Yeah, I like that you
Yeah.
called out the investing in the relationship, like this idea that you're like putting something in and that you will gain returns from that.
Return on investment. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say too, to your point, like that is my number one gripe with the notion of like marriage is work, marriage is hard work. Like, what are we
Mhm.
talking about? What kind of work are we talking about? Is all the hard work that women put into marriage created
Mm,
equal? Right? Like,
right.
what does that mean? Does that mean getting like yelled at by your spouse? Like, get it to the point of this relationship we're talking about here, being
Yeah.
controlled by your spouse and then like working through it in Mallorca, Spain? Like, what are we
Right.
talking about?
Right. Right. And like how much of the investment is really like a woman trying to teach and or change the man. And that's the
Right.
investment, is that you get the return on the investment through his sort of changed behavior or enlightenment or becoming a better man.
And like the social capital of getting to continue to be married, the social and
Yes.
economic capital, right?
That's a great point. And like funny, of course, then to have such explicitly financial language when talking about it, right? Like it's like
Right.
it's signaling it, you know? It's right
Right.
there.
And like we will get into this and I'm sure say this many times, but like I'm a big fan of therapy. I love therapy. I once was a big fan of couples therapy, but when we start to talk about marriage and relationships in these ways, I think that's
Yeah.
when things get pretty tricky.
Okay, speaking of tricky, let's take a break from the pop culture fun to get into the history of couples therapy. It is not exactly a light history. Amanda, do you know that couples therapy has its roots in eugenics? Does that surprise you?
I mean, it doesn't surprise me per se. I would say, okay, so most of what I know about the origins of couples therapy is like sort of mid century onward, like kind of related to the evolution of psychiatry in general. Like, I know that Freud admitted he wasn't capable of treating couples. It's just like, whatever, but he obviously
Hmm.
wasn't like really capable of treating women and he tried. So
Yeah,
I
it
don't
didn't
know.
stop him. Yeah.
But psychotherapy was obviously like very centered on the individual, right? And so
Mhm.
when we're talking about couples therapy, it's more relational. And I know that like from there, approaches like family systems theory and some of these other like clinical modalities that are like super common today emerged. Before that, I guess my understanding of like what couples therapy would have looked like is that it was like women's marital advice books about like how to make your husband happy and be a good
Mm.
wife and sort of fit into like these normative bourgeois standards. But that wasn't clinical stuff. That was, you know, like conduct books. And I know that those go way back. I know there's even a 14th century one called The Good Wife's Guide by an anonymous writer.
Oh my
And it's
god.
written in the voice of a husband talking to his 15-year-old bride,
Oh god.
basically teaching her how to be a good wife. And it includes like recipes and instructions for how to care for their horses.
Jesus.
So, you know, I mean, I know that like the world of like advice, marital advice has
Mhm.
always been super gendered and that like American white people have always been, you know, interested in the eugenics project in terms of the
Yeah,
American family. So
yeah.
I'm not surprised, but I don't think I know the history that you're referring to. Can you bring us up to
Oh,
speed?
yes. Yes, I can. I wanna introduce you to this guy, Paul Popenoe. I don't know if that's how you say his name, but it's how I'm gonna say it.
What a name.
He he was called the father of marriage counseling and the man who saves marriages. But
Mm,
first, he was a eugenicist and a supporter of forced sterilization.
great, great.
Yeah. So in the 1920s, he actually studied the sterilization of women at an institution for the quote unquote insane and feeble minded. Many of these women were sex workers or were generally considered promiscuous.
Of course.
Yeah. Then in 1930, Popenoe changed his approach. Forget sterilizing sex workers and promiscuous women. He opened the American Institute of Family Relations in Los Angeles, and the aim was to promote a successful family life.
Mm.
Part of the bet here was that his eugenic aims would actually be more effective if he focused on getting the right people to reproduce, as opposed to focusing on preventing the reproduction of the wrong people.
This sounds very familiar.
Yes, yes. So basically, in other words, he focused on marriage counseling of white, straight, middle class people instead of forced sterilization. Across the next few decades, marriage counseling exploded. Fast forward to the 50s, and you have the post war baby boom, post war abundance, and a growing focus on family culture that was partly Popenoe's influence. Then in the 60s, this dude gave advice in a column for Ladies' Home Journal called Can This Marriage Be Saved?
Mm.
Yeah, and it featured case studies from the institute that he founded, showing how people, but really women, had managed to turn their marriages around.
How exactly was this guy attempting to turn marriages around?
I'm sure you will be shocked to hear that it was often because of the wives basically disciplining themselves by being more subordinate, more self sacrificing, more domestic, better housewives, sexier. When a husband was abusive or violent, counselors trained by Popenoe sometimes advised that the wife consider what she had done to make her husband unhappy.
That's so dark
Hmm.
and not surprising at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
So basically, if your marriage is needs to be saved,
Mhm.
which apparently that was how we talked about marriages in the 60s and how we still talk about them today. If your marriage needed to be saved, women just needed to be better wives.
Yeah. Yeah,
Got
it was a
it.
failing of the wife. And so this shit by the 70s basically started to feel pretty outdated. And I have a quote from the historian Wendy Klein, if you want to give this a read.
Feminism and the Sexual Revolution challenged Popeno's conservative message of marital satisfaction based on traditional gender roles. Marriage counseling as a field developed a more integrative approach to problem solving that attempted to take into account individual needs and desires.
Yeah, so what do we think
Did
about
it?
right. Right. I guess the question is like, what do we think about the fact that couples therapy sort of had these very, very troubling origins? And then what do we think about like the idea that it's sort of evolved since then? And is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I would probably push back against the fact that it evolved like to its most possibly to its most liberated form. Well, yeah, I mean, of course, sure, I can see how like marriage counseling today tries to take a more integrative approach. I mean, I'm sure we'll unpack this and see like how that actually shakes out. But I don't know. I mean, I would argue that there's still the tendency to see a lot of sort of traditional thinking within marriage counseling simply because, it's rooted in so many of our beliefs about marriage
Yeah.
and divorce.
Yeah. And you've written and read quite a bit about, we're talking like the 70s, there started to be this shift, but you've written a lot about the 90s and the couples therapy boom then. Can you enlighten us?
So there was a big couples therapy boom in the 90s, and that really coincided with the introduction of sexual consent in marriage, at least legally. We could talk about whether or not, you know, those laws are actually enforced.
Can we underscore that? Because you've mentioned this in the past in conversation, and every time I just like find it so shocking. Can you like explain exactly what you mean? Because it's stunning, and I feel like we should all know this and talk about this more often.
Yes. So, the idea that a man could rape his wife, right, was not nationally criminalized until the mid 90s. And there's many, people who argue that even today, those laws around rape and sexual assault between married couples, if a husband assaults his wife, right, are not enforced the same way that rape laws and assault laws are enforced if the perpetrator is not the husband.
Mm-hmm.
So, while technically in the mid 90s, marital rape was criminalized nationwide, it's also worth maybe an entire episode, us
Yeah.
exploring what those laws actually look like and how they are actually enforced. And also, questions about like burden of proof on the wife and things like that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the long history of marriage is that sexual duty was baked into a wife's role.
Right. That feels very important when considering this couples therapy boom in the 90s. Like
Yeah,
that is happening alongside this extremely shockingly belated legal development around consent.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And I think at the time, like we have John Gottman's book, Why Marriages Succeed or Fail, that came out in 94, and it was totally unconscious of its own gender bias. So
Mm.
Gottman argued in the book that I think this is even on the back jacket copy that like wives who make sour faces with when their husbands talk are likely to be separated within 4 years, which is just such a
Mm.
bogus statistic. Like, so how many sour facial expressions equal 4 years, right? Is it
Right.
one? Is it just like every time
Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
talks, or
Feels very unscientific. Yeah.
very unscientific? But Gottman's project too evolved into like this notion of divorce prediction, right?
Mm.
Here are the ways in which you can avoid divorce. So it was this really like paranoid approach to thinking about marriage and really to thinking about couples therapy.
Mm.
And then, of course, that was also like tied at the time to the ways people were thinking about therapy as like a form of personal improvement, which says a lot about like how we think of marriage, as a kind of like, middle class success story. Why marriages succeed or fail also instructed women to, well, first of all, to just not make those faces, of course,
Jesus
because
Christ.
you don't want to get divorced, right?
Never mind that, like, they probably had reasons to be making sour faces, you
I
know?
mean, we always do. We always do, right?
Like, yeah.
Sometimes a sour face is called for, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that book, Gottman's book also claimed that men withdraw from women who are overly critical. And so women had to just adjust to this reality that if they
Mm.
were going to be overly critical, if they were going to make a face, right, that their husbands would withdraw from that. And withdraw from them. And the pattern of wives sort of attacking their husbands, according to the book, was rooted in inherent sex differences. But getting stuck in that kind of routine would lead to divorce. So this was like an obstacle
Mm.
that men and women had to overcome if they wanted to stay married, right? Which, of course, everyone did, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the answer, Gottman's book and his later work insists, is for pursuers, right? He has this like notion of pursuers and the pursued, usually women, to find a way to come on less
Mm.
strong, right?
Hmm.
So Gottman's like a really interesting figure who I think people still kind of love today, and because
Yeah.
he's developed this whole institute, and I forget how many wives he's had, but it's not like he hasn't been divorced.
He is an expert, you know?
Yeah, true. He went through it all, so he's seen a lot. He's seen a lot of sour faces. A lot of sour faces.
That's how he developed his theory, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right. He's like, "Oh, 4 years, clock starts now." But Gottman's method gained a lot of popularity in the 90s. And, in some respects, like a lot of what he says, it's hard to argue with, right? It's suggesting that couples do pretty non-controversial things like solve solvable problems,
Mhm.
which
Sure.
is sounds okay. We
Cool.
should
Yeah.
definitely do that. And overcome gridlock, like
Uh-huh.
okay, right? But how do we
Sure.
do that?
Yeah.
And he also suggests that spouses should let partners influence one another, right? But of course, he's not exploring who influences who and how much and what way and
Yeah.
who's solving the problems and what even is gridlock and how do you
Mm.
overcome it, right? And then, of course, you had like the collision of self help with couples therapy, around that time that Gottman was gaining popularity. We have like Gary Chapman's love languages, which we could talk
Oh,
about for hours.
still going strong on TikTok. Yeah.
Totally. And he, to
Jeez.
be clear, is a Baptist minister. So
Oh, I
I
did not okay. Didn't
kind
know
of feel
that.
like that's all we need to say about him.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole episode. Okay.
Yeah. And I should say that, Chapman and a lot of these couples therapy, marital advice gurus, also push physical intimacy. And, so
Mm.
we sort of moved through the appointment sex era, which maybe we're still in. And then, it's like that's all fine and good. Yeah, like a relationship should have intimacy, but the bigger questions of how power is like moving in a relationship and consent, right? Those things are not obviously explored in this literature.
Right. Right. All very interesting, especially because, like, while I was researching this episode, I stumbled across a bunch of literature, some of it maybe a bit too self congratulatory, that was reviewing all the ways that the field of couples therapy has evolved, and there are many ways. Like, there are progressive therapists, feminist therapists, there are therapists who are serving LGBTQ plus individuals and couples. uh, Couples therapy isn't just something designed to get white, cis, married, straight people to reproduce, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but
Right.
how far have we come, really?
Of course, my knee jerk reaction is to say, well, maybe it is, though, still like trying to maintain some kind of
Mhm.
notion of the status quo. But I think that you're totally right that naturally, more progressive notions of relationships and gender and sexuality have made their way into therapy rooms. For sure, and
Yeah.
I mean, we see that even on the show, right? It's Dr. Orna, right? She's amazing and
Yeah.
super radical, I think, in her
Yeah.
approaches to relationships.
Right.
Um, but I guess it all has me thinking, like, regardless of who is allowed to participate in couples therapy, what exactly is the therapy for? And
Mhm.
how do we define it as a success? Even if it's more inclusive,
Yeah.
like what are we working so hard on? And I just think about all these people in America going to
Yeah.
therapy to save their marriages and put in the work.
Yeah.
And I just can't get myself to believe that the premise that they are all equally fine with getting divorced or staying married.
Totally. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you make a great point that we can have therapeutic theory around how providers should be serving the needs of both individuals as opposed to just keeping them together at all costs. But when you go to couples therapy, you're inevitably showing up with motivations and desires that are shaped by outside cultural pressures
Mhm.
from practical things like money and real estate and childcare, but then also the big stuff like romantic narratives and compulsory heterosexuality and maybe shame around divorce and like needing to stay together for the kids.
Mhm.
All of that shows up in the therapy room. And my experience talking about marriage with people here in the Bay Area, mostly women, but some men also, is that a lot of folks experience marriage as difficult work, like really echoing like the headlines around celebrities in couples therapy, like it's work. And that work runs the gamut from like my husband doesn't do his fair share around the house to we have trouble communicating to, we're in a tough spot because of XYZ life event. Sometimes even there's a feeling of marriage as really pretty joyless and punishing.
Yeah. I mean, I hear and see a lot of that in the suburbs of the Bay Area.
Mhm.
And I mean, nothing throws that into relief like getting a divorce. Like, suddenly you
Mm.
just start to see married people and you're like, do these people even like each other? Like, are they
Wow.
okay? And people will come to you more often with, their marital problems, I
Oh,
guess.
I bet. What
And
is
that's
that like, though? I mean, what is that like for you to be like suddenly like you're the sort of outlet for marital issues?
I mean, part of me is like, that's great. Like,
Yeah.
let's talk about, like, you need someone to talk to, sure. But it is also a weird I don't know. It's a weird thing that I haven't quite sorted through. I've actually been thinking a lot about like relationships between married women and divorced
Mm.
women,
Mm.
and the way that marriage is sort of like the strange elephant in the room in every conversation.
Interesting.
Um, because there is this, like, when you're communicating about how you like hate your husband
Yeah.
and how you're so exhausted because you do everything, and I'm sort of like, well, you don't have to live like that, right? But but I
Right.
don't want to say that
Right.
because that's sort of up to you.
Yeah.
Um, it's a really
Mm.
interesting feature of heterosexuality, and I would say it's like a feature, not a bug, for sure.
Totally.
Um,
Oh my god, I wanna talk to you, this is definitely a whole other episode because I just
yeah,
wanna hear
totally.
so much about your experience of that because it's just like, I think single women, single mothers, like, throughout history have been this, like a dangerous figure that sort of shows that things can be otherwise,
Oh, for sure. For
and,
sure.
like so anyways, but
And I think it throws into relief for married women, like, their own complicity with the
yeah,
institution of marriage in an
totally.
uncomfortable way. And even if that's not like necessarily how one would articulate it to themselves, right? There's like that weird, I see you on the outside and like I have to kind of judge you or your marriage or understand that, like, it's actually very similar, I think, to sobriety, right? Like, I have
Yes.
to see that you must have hit rock bottom in a way that I never would or could,
Mm,
right? In order for me to not sort of compare myself to you. I mean, I think in general, it's just this again, this notion that marriage is like this really, really hard work, or that it's joyless, as you said, and punishing, that I think we all just kind of need to sit with. And like, sure, a lot of that work, and I'll say this at the end of the show when we talk about our personal experiences, I used to be a big proponent of like all relationships are hard work, you know?
Mm,
And it's true. Like to be in a
yeah.
relationship with people, you have to work through, difficult spots.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of that work, I think, in marriage is about like undoing gender socializations, right?
Yes.
Men and women approach things differently. And I think that there's obviously value in that. And sometimes people can sort of overcome that. But I think that's only true if it's a shared project. And most of what I see is that women get that men don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I question how often it's truly an equitable project.
Right. Right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I also feel like often when I hear women in straight marriages complain about their partners, there isn't an acknowledgement of the gendered socialization piece that you're talking about. Like, there's more of this sort of naturalizing
Mm-hmm.
language oftentimes about
Right.
how men are,
Yes.
which makes it feel so intractable. But then on the other side of it, like what you're saying, like, if you treat it as something that can be addressed and solved, then you're sort of in the pickle of like, are you the one who's trying to untangle all of that influence? And are you doing some of that in therapy? And is
Right.
that your work to do?
Right. And so if you're in couples therapy, like are we both there to deconstruct like everything that that the patriarchy put on us since we were kids and how we bring that
Right.
to marriage? Or, is it a woman working overtime in her marriage,
Uh-huh.
and a man waxing poetic in the therapy office about what's wrong with the wife's desire, as in
Uh-huh.
the
Uh-huh.
example of dying for sex.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and, I'll say too, like sometimes couples in any relationship have to work through, trauma or like our, fucked up upbringings. I certainly did,
Yeah.
or grief or like big life changes. But, sometimes I think it's just too much for a couple or a
Mm-hmm.
therapist to overcome. And so I worry about
Mm-hmm.
that Protestant work ethic of like, you just work yourself into the ground until you
Yeah.
die because you
Yeah.
got to save that marriage, even if it's like fundamentally not working.
Uh-oh, you've hit the paywall. That means you're missing out on the rest of this conversation, and things get really juicy from here on out. We talk about sexism in the therapy room. We detail our own personal experiences with couples therapy, the good, the bad, and the life changing. We also get a little weird and fun and role play a couple in therapy. To upgrade to a paid subscription and get access to all of that, go to our Substack at direstraitspod.com. That's straights with a GH. Paid subscribers get 2 full episodes every month, access to the Dire Straits online community via chats and episode threads, plus a growing list of special features and bonus content. Dire Straits is a 100% independent, scrappy, aging millennial feminist operation. We are not financially dependent on corporate media or advertisers. If we had normal day jobs, the podcast would probably get us fired from them. The best way to support our work is through a paid subscription. Come join us.